First, let me introduce the people I have here. You've all seen them on stage already before, but let me introduce them one more time. We have Emma Paetz, who wrote, co-produced the film, and of course stars in it. Welcome, Emma. Then we obviously have the film's director, Tom Brennan. And then we have a film critic and member of our selection committee this year, Eileen Jones. Welcome. So I think before we start, I have to explain our menu here because I see a lot of bottles. I wasn't prepared. So, as I understand, this is self-made Mexicana, which is a weird German drink for shot, made by Jan Soldat. Thank you, Jan. This is a version without alcohol. This is with alcohol. It's quite spicy, so I don't know if you're into it, but in any moment of the debate, feel free to just take a shot. And there's also, I didn't know about this, a bourbon. I can put it over here. So that's for you, Eileen, first. Okay, of course, we're gonna talk a bit about Worry Time in a minute, but maybe we let that film sink in a bit more. And I'll start with you, Eileen, because as you know, hopefully, this is a debate format called Steilvorlage, which the idea is to have one member of our selection committee, which consists of 5 people, 2 from our Directors Collective and 3 international film critics. You're one of them. You were one of them this year. You also said before it was kind of the first time you were on a festival committee or did this kind of job?
Yeah, I've never done film festival programming. Obviously, I watch a lot of films as a film critic, but I've never, frankly, had such a grueling experience of film viewing as I had as part of the selection committee. It seemed just like hundreds and hundreds of films over months, from August to December. I mean, one's eyes bled from the agony of it, and you wondered why you'd ever been interested in film after all. I still flinch when there's a Vimeo queuing up on my computer.
I'm sorry to hear that.
but let me add that ultimately it became quite exhilarating as we narrowed down and found exciting. We were looking for such exciting films that were unique. We'd seen nothing like them. And this Worry Time is a great example because it's even hard to describe to people in any coherent way what it is. Even though I think you grip it as you're watching it, but I've read the most outlandish descriptions of this film online. I don't know if you've looked them up, but things like one is micro-budget absurdist feminist thriller. One is sci-fi pseudo-documentary on themes of male dominance. I mean, just wild struggles to even just say it all, what this film is about. And I think that really speaks to its complexity and what an amazing film it is.
Yeah, definitely. We have to unpack that a bit, I guess. But maybe first also because as we have also seen a short film, Fiction Contract by Carolyn Lazard, who I said before, they can't be here. They try to make it happen, but ultimately that attempt failed, so we can't ask them about their film. But you also, of course, almost all programs here are 2 films. The shorter film and the feature film. When you saw these films, have you already thought about that? Which film combines with what other film? In what way did you already process this when watching films?
I should have been thinking about it. I just claim being a newbie at this, that I wasn't thinking about it at all. This was very embarrassing when we got to the discussions as a selection committee of what should pair with what, and everyone else on the committee immediately chimed in with these wonderful ideas, and I'm the only one saying, well, wait a minute, let me see this. But it's extraordinary to look at what great pairings they turned out to be. I think there's so much overlap between Fiction Contract and Worry Time once you're watching them together. There's just, well, we can get into what some of the overlap is, but I have to admit, once again, weakest link in some ways here that I was not at all. I wasn't thinking about it. I was not prepared. Next time I'll be prepared.
Maybe it's also not the best thing to do. I don't know. I was just curious to hear about that. How was it for you when you knew that there was another film premiering with your film? Is that something you think about before? Like, could it be also make you nervous or curious, or what did you think before?
I think, I was curious about how they would pair together, and then it was funny. I've seen Worry Time so many times, but in watching the short first, I wasn't. It like the resonances. I didn't even fully feel them during the short, and then it was like even throughout Worry Time. As I said, I've seen it so many times, but throughout the entire film, I was like, oh yeah, I don't know that it's all throughout. It's not just the obvious things of pregnancy. There's just like so many similarities interwoven. It was really, really cool to see them together.
Yeah, I agree, and it's such a I love that short so much. In it there's something about artificiality between the both which is really fascinating, and I loved how in Fiction Contract it's like the politic is so buried. It's like it's so there, but it's subtextual, and instead you get people like acting, crying, and bodies, and yeah, I loved that, and I think also the routine of it I loved. So like, oh hi, it's me. I'm just gonna come in, and I'm reaching in now. You know, there's something about that I think we share, which is like the routine of violence and the routine of intense bodily experience.
And something about them questioning their own performances, which was such an interesting moment in Fiction Contract, was the doctor says something like, this is my baby as much as it is your baby. They kind of pause for a second, questioning the sense and delivery of that. And yeah, that, yeah.
Yeah, maybe it makes sense to have a bit of more context about Carolyn Lazard's film. I also had to do some research to do that, but I found that quite interesting that Carolyn Lazard is an artist who not only works in film, but also with performance, with sculptures, with writing, so various media. And this is actually also part of a true film installation that is paired up with another film that's called Vital, which is also a short film, but a fiction film. But a black birthing person's first prenatal visit to a hospital, and they're treated quite condescendingly, and then at the end apparently also like learn that the insurance doesn't cover this visit, so it's quite a bleak view on actual patient medical staff relations. And in this film, of course, there's a lot of like care, but it's with the mannequin. And this mannequin is called, I think you hear it in the film as well, Jegede. And Jegede is an actual mannequin that was part of an initiative in 2020 by the New York government to basically reduce the racial gap in maternal mortality. And part of that was also to produce non-white mannequins, which I found quite interesting also as a background to the film.
Yeah, and I would just add one element that maybe strikes me more than it does others, but for me, there's a kind of embodied horror of female experience that is huge in both films. There's something about that awful plastic slit and the whole way you just reach in and yank out that it seems to me crosses over so well with what Worry Time is dealing with.
It's also like textural, right? It's aesthetic, because the like a plastic baby coming out of that like silicon thing. Do you know the Dolmio adverts? Yeah. So there's a pasta sauce in the UK called Dolmio, and for years it was like a kind of Italian Muppet family. But what was weird is that the food was real, but the characters were felt Muppets. And they would reach up to like eat the thing, and it was like something so uncanny and like disgusting about the like things about texture, and there's something about the language of care, and then also the like pushing something through plastic, and you go like, oh, something wrong there.
Deeply, deeply wrong.
When I also thought about these films and then saw them again, I also thought about the titles of them, that they almost could be used interchangeably. I mean, not quite, but I mean, of course, also in Fiction Contract, there is a time to worry in between where something seems to go wrong. And then also in your film, I thought Fiction Contract, I don't know, might be a title because, of course, on the one hand, it is about how to translate some real life experience or on a variety of levels into fiction and what modes there are to do that. And then also like the contractual conditions, like who can do that, who has the money, who is like in control of that. So there was one combination I had in mind, like the title.
Well, and to add to that, just the worry time idea, which is isn't it all the time? Because even the normal, again, processes of a seemingly healthy body are being represented in terms that lean easily into horror, right? So, and the fiction contract seems to be, well, we all just pretend it's not, you know. So women obsessively checking the color of their vaginal, just like even the most apparently healthy processes, it's always just tending toward, is it all going to go wrong? Which is harrowing to think of it, because even when it's going quote unquote right, it lends itself to horror. I can still remember when I found out, I was quite young, and a friend got pregnant, and she handed me the pamphlet with the list of symptoms that a pregnant woman might experience. When I read that the teeth loosen because hormones flood the body and everything loosens, all the sinews and bones and everything. So your whole body starts pulling apart from it so it can pass. This Everyone's staring at me in horror, but I'm not making it up. But at the time, I thought sci-fi could do no more to convey something horrifying and terrifying, and it's just the basic reality. So again, even the normal condition of being a woman in a body seems to have special terrors that for me cross over both films intensely, especially yours, of course.
And I think that's why I also like the title so much, because worry is usually a word that you don't, it's quite minor. It's like in terms of, or compared to fear or anxiety or horror, it's not as forceful. But then in your film, it becomes something very, very existential, almost, or very horrorful. At what point did you come up with that title? Was that from the beginning? Was that title of the project right from the start?
Yeah, it was very early on. It actually comes from a sort of like cognitive behavioral therapy thing, which is you're meant to, whatever horrors are happening in your life, just have a time to worry in the day, and that's when it's okay, and your brain can focus on it then. But that's it. But I guess it came from this idea, sort of what you just touched on, Eileen, with, well, what if when things are going right, like with Vivian and her partner, like they're moving in together, isn't that nice? And that's got this film going, that's lovely. What if just worrying about it in a compact time doesn't suit the situation? Yeah. So it was from the beginning.
And at what point did you, because usually, that's part of film culture, sadly, I guess, that the main information you get about a film is the film's title and the director's title. And that was also the only thing I knew when I started to watch your film for the first time. And then at one point I was like, okay, this is a bit weird, it's made by a man. And then I saw the end credits, and it was quite interesting that first it was like the writer and producer credit, your credit, and then it was the director's credit, which is quite unusual. So that, of course, makes me want to ask, like, at what point did you come in? What was the relation between you guys? How did you find each other? Or when did the director move into your writing project, or was he from the beginning?
I knew Tom socially, and I had the script, and I saw a play that Tom directed called Unicorn. And I remember being so struck by Tom's direction of the play. And that was, you probably speak to it more, but a play about a woman. It was a one-woman show. and she is finding herself as the unicorn in all these threesomes. But Tom's handling of the material that was such like a sort of, I don't know, quite violent in some ways and extremely vulnerable about like female sexuality. Tom's handling of it and his also like visual panache with very minimal options available on the set. I just thought that I thought it could work quite well. It's very boring time.
Yeah, and so we worked on the script for a year together, and I think because I come from theatre in which actually like playwright is God, you know, you don't. That's often the top of at least the British theatre, that it's like a really playwright-led culture. So it's very interesting for me to enter this space too, in which we both noticed the same thing, which is like Tom Brennan's worry time, and I'm going like, this is such a strange, because if you don't know, yeah, I think there is something kind of odd and problematic about it. And I think we're both keen to also sort of question this notion of like auteur and what that means, and proliferate like collaboration, because there's so many ways in which director isn't. I mean, there's so much of, you know, my aesthetic sensibility and my, you know, creative sense here in the film for sure, but also like directing can be like a manager, and it can be like a sort of sports coach or something, where you're just kind of bringing other people to their best of their materials. So yeah, it's interesting. I mean, there's just so much like heritage to unpack there in terms of male directors getting to say, here's my poem. Do you know what I mean? I think that's yeah, it's an uncomfortable presentation for, I think, the way that this project has come about.
And you also, in your theatre work, you have a collective, right? The wardrobe ensemble? Or what?
Yeah, definitely. And actually, strangely, like, yes, a lot of shows about sex and women. and in part of that, then you're also aware of your of two things, I suppose. It's like tension being an interesting part of a collaborative process, and the tension between the material and me as the director. So at which points it's like, you know, I think my male gaze, whatever that is going to be present in the film in some capacity, and how I like negotiate that with Emma. Like, when am I pushing something because it's core to the sense of the film and my interpretation of the sense of the film, and when am I just bulldozing over something that is core to Emma that I just don't understand? So listening it feels like a really integral part of that process.
What did you think of the Charlie character? The director?
Yeah, it's horrifying, isn't it? Because, you know, like, even in post, we were adding things that were like things I said in ADR and stuff. So, yeah, for sure. That it's it's like there are moments that feel really true to the thing, and I love that. You know, it's not like, what feels really important is that Annette's also allowed to be like awful. It's not an advertisement for her, you know. Everyone's kind of problematic, and I think that's the sort of filmmaking we like. Everyone's difficult, but Annette like is horrid as well, in a way that I think is really appropriate, because I think when people think about feminist films, which is I do notice in theatre for sure, it's like something will be advertised as a deeply feminist work, and then you go, well, fucking hell, like, all the women are so boring and all the men get the best lines, you know? And that feels really unfair, and I'd be angry about that if I was an actress.
Yeah, I think that was part of my, after the first time I saw the film, I was kind of a bit lost, and then I think viewing it the second time, I understood that more, maybe, what made me also feel that way, or feel confused, or feel lost. And I think one of them was exactly what you also said, like the relation of the film to its protagonist, and then also my relation to her, because I think intuitively I kind of started rooting for her, because of course she tries to make a film, she's kind of the center, and all these men are around her and try to kind of take that away from her. That's kind of part of it, at least. But then something else happens, of course. Something else happens with her and to her, and I think at the second viewing I understood a bit better what the film did to make me feel that way. How was that for you? I think you also probably saw the film more than once.
Yeah.
How was your first viewing experience?
At first, I just knew I was pleased, and I didn't even know exactly why I was so pleased. So I had to think a while and see it again. But definitely the risk taking of making the audience want to laugh at Annette's emotional extremes, even while you're really courting two different genres here. It seems to me, anyway, that there's this kind of satirical dark comedy that lets us take an outsider's view of Annette, and again, kind of laugh at her and find her awful and appalling at points, while we take an insider view that's a very typical gothic horror move, where the woman's you're embedded within the woman's subjectivity often, but that's also her greatest problem. She perceives a danger. She tries telling everyone else something terrible is happening here. No one believes her, and the danger ratchets up. So but you identify with her strongly all the way through, but it's intensely dramatic all the way through. So to have both operating, I was so delighted. I can't tell you. I will say one thing. I'm playing the ugly American in this group, as I kept saying in the selection panel, that the absence of humor sometimes does get to me when you watch a lot of art film. It's just like, please, please, could we crack a smile ever? Do we have to be signaling our deep seriousness like anyone doubts it? So just to have someone have the nerve to be like, it's also funny, was what a relief. God bless you for that. I think you saved my sanity at one point. I thank you.
Yeah, maybe stay with the humor actually, because I think it's a really funny film, but not in a way that I could describe easily. Like, it's not exactly a farce, it's not exactly satire, it's not exactly parody. It's something more, it's something different. When you wrote the film, how did you think about the tone of it, or these kind of different kinds maybe of, in what way can this be funny but not tapping into any of because I could imagine this film also as a way more, I don't know, stupid parody or something, but it isn't.
I guess personally, I don't know, when I'm experiencing films, I never think of, as I'm watching it, I never think about what's the tone of this? So it's not something that I was conscious about trying to wrangle. And I know that, I always felt very, very strongly about preserving the film's right to be silly, and just kind of unexpectedly silly when it needed to be.
And I think one of the struggles, and in an interesting way, was you were like, there is no film like this, like, deal with it kind of thing. Because often I think a lot of development of film projects is always like, oh, it's like this meets this, and you were like, it's not. And then the question is, like, in negotiating tone, we watched If I Had Legs I'd Kick You recently, Mary Bronstein's film, and it was like really weird because there's these kind of uncanny similarities in some ways, but it's also a very funny film in a very dark sensibility in the way that we also resonate with, I think, but it's so close to the protagonist, in a way that is different, and I think we were sort of trying to jump between things, and so that actually you are allowed like a comic wide, like the sort of architecture is funny at some level, or like the scene's just very flat, or trying to think about blocking and kind of image in a way that is allowed to be a bit funny in places. But it was a fine line, because also, I think we maybe think it's funnier than a fresh audience, because there are some shocking things in it where we're like, yeah, cool, whatever. And forget that the first time buyer is going to be like, okay, like negotiating the strange puzzle we've like built for them. So yeah, like that thing of, to create a tone like this, like how organic or loose should the camera be in relation to the action and to the actors, felt complicated to get right, I think.
Well, and also, it's so notable the way you end on a scene that suddenly feels much calmer and more just like suddenly it's like we're just watching a drama, a quiet drama. And I can't help but notice, I hate to harp on this, but I have to bring it up, wearing red throughout, and then suddenly she's in full blue, and the way all of it seems to just come together in a sudden quiet and calm, even though what's happening is full of tension and arguably, I don't know, you could tell me how you want the ending to land, but it seems a fairly despairing ending. Yeah.
Yeah. I actually felt a bit guilty in some ways when we were done because of how bleak it is, and in the context of everything we've talked about in the film to do with the realities of like living as a woman, and then to end it with pretty mundane, so pretty average in many ways, but like devoid of any hope. I still kind of feel a bit of guilt about that. I don't know what kind of social contract that means we've entered into in terms of, what we're saying to maybe young women. I don't know. It's all I know is it just feels truthful, and it's what you were saying about the horror of things that are supposedly going fine. They're still horrific, even though it's going according to plan.
Then they go wrong.
Yeah.
But I think that's exactly the way to put it. It's truthful. I mean, if you ever study feminist theory, I taught briefly. I taught for feminist film theory, and a smart student, came up at the end, and she said something like, "Is there any way to read feminist theory and not plunge into existential despair?" And I said, "Oh, you have been doing the reading," because if you're going to move into this area, that I think that's part of the disappointment with a lot of films that are advertised as feminist, is they somehow want to come out in a way that's affirming, or this terrible pop feminism where it's all "you go girl, yes you did it, now you own your own company." It's so awful because it seems like it's just refusing to look at it, and you haven't refused, which is so remarkable given how funny the film is, especially.
Yeah, and I also think like it's an interesting film in this historical moment also in cinema, because I have the feeling that in the last years there were quite a lot of films trying to do, or yeah, to come to terms with the female experience, with toxic masculinity, with sexual abuse in various ways, experimenting with genre, and also thinking about questions that the characters in your film also grapple with, like, do we show the acts? How do we end? Is she a tragic hero? Is she an anti-hero? And I was a bit wondering to what extent this film is also like film critique in a way, and thinks or also reflects on this, on other films trying to turn something into fiction that maybe is not fictionalizable, or is it?
I think we talked a lot about like the unknowable, which is a difficult thing to. So I suppose like a lot of the black hole imagery and the spacey stuff was about like, oh, there's something that is going on emotionally and psychologically, which is beyond like language and can't be easily put into words and can't be resolved. Actually, that, and it feels like, there's actually someone on a previous year panel who was like, I'm not interested in uniting the audience, I'm interested in dividing people up, and I think that's a sort of valuable encounter, but also to just like look at the horrific abyss of the character's experience, and also within a sort of highfalutin context of like filmmakers and like middle-class urban people, like kind of being very polite and nice to each other. Generally, it's like that's the sticky stuff for me, is like, oh yeah, like good soft boys fucking. It's like, what are they doing? Like, what is that? And what, like, one of my favorite moments is when Dougie's like, Dougie's like, are you wet? And then she's like, I don't want to talk about this. And then he puts his head on the table. And I'm like, oh, it's so true, isn't it? It's like men and their relationship to sex and their demands for sex and sweet men. And there's something about the fact that it's really like a polite society that the film depicts. I love that tension. It's like the pure horrific metaphorical imagery of like, we're able to go there and to show that really on the surface, and then in a very kind of operatic sense, and then have this like very minute language of dominance and of oppression at the same time. That's what I loved about it from the initial draft, actually. It was like the stacking of forms on top of each other, and that the last sequence, the last 10, 15 minutes of the film is able to sort of stack those things, lay them on top of each other in a way that for me felt very operatic. I think we talked about like, the sort of tragic hero thing. She's trying to do something honorable and kills everyone in the process.
Well, Anna's left profoundly alone.
Yeah.
In that hallway. Hallways are very bad. I want to stay out of the hall.
Yeah.
I think I in terms of what you were just saying about is what's a commentary on other films, I think that a lot of what we were trying to do was like, I mean, it's what Annette says in the film is people, you know, when these sort of horrifically violent but maybe subtle in many ways things happen to women in life, they don't really happen like they do in the movies, like with someone having experiencing some shocking event that everyone in the room can agree upon. That was a horrible event. He is a bad guy. It doesn't really happen like that in life. And I think that what Tom was saying about the stacking of genres is that the real thing in life is being played out so much more invisibly and complexly, to the point where no one else is willing to see it for what it is. And the only way for it to be heard or understood is for Annette to turn it into this sci-fi operatic genre thing that is like this bloody alien rips a woman apart as he comes out of her, and then people might be like, oh, yeah, that seems bad.
But then on the other hand, I think the film has also this other history, or this other layer, which is also about the friendship between the two friends, like Annette and Vivian, who she tries or to turn into fiction. And this is something I also really, really appreciated, that this is there and it is very like palpable also. But it's something that almost is also, because of all the men in the movie, almost vanishes, and you have to like feel it in certain scenes, because there are not a lot of scenes with Vivian, but you feel that they are very meaningful. That this is also like a big part of the whole trajectory.
Yeah, it's the most heartrending thing is that everyone regards it as impossible and childish, including Vivian. Is so startling. And yes, why can't the relationship between female friends, a profound relationship, be a primary relationship? And it's just dismissed out of hand throughout. But I love that part. That was great.
And sort of continuing the sort of Annette is also difficult thing is like that we had lots of conversations. It's like, what is the true nature of their relationship really? Like, are they, and how it might have just been a little glimmering thing and not the longest, most deep relationship in the world somehow. But it's like a film about, I think there's so much in it about like compromise and the horrors of compromise, and as you say, like not being able to push through that. And so I like that for Vivian, like Vivian has this sort of slightly mature mothering thing going on, the way that she behaves, which again undermines Annette in lots of ways, which is important, I think, but it's not too clean.
When is the appropriate one?
Yeah, I want a shot. Whenever you want, maybe now.
We should talk while.
Okay. So, cheers, everyone. Cheers. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Delicious.
Okay. This is with the alcohol. This one. Yes. And yeah, maybe I would have one more question before we maybe also open up to the audience. A bit back to the collectiveness, maybe of also, because you also said this was a collective endeavor, and you, I think in theater, at least for me, I'm not too much, I'm not a theater person, but theater collectives I kind of know more than filmmaking collectives. So I was also wondering if you working as a theater collective, and also you as an actress also work with a lot of directors on a lot of film sets. So is the theater collective like a good example to have for like improving I don't know film sets, or how was your like experience of like making this film maybe as a
Well, I wouldn't necessarily. Well, I feel like there's two. Well, first, I wouldn't. You'll be able to speak to this more, but I would never for a moment say that theater should be an example. Not that this is what you're saying. The theater should be an example to film because it's any sort of healthier way to operate, because it's often not. But yeah, the collaboration. I mean, you spoke about this earlier. The collaboration throughout with us and everyone else was not extremely normal, not really questioned or really thought through. It's only been as we bring it out into the world that in the discussion of it kind of has to be maybe siphoned off to one or two people, but in the doing of it, it never felt I don't know, unnatural or yeah.
I agree. But I think if someone said like, oh, the shape of filmmaking is like a lemon or something, like it starts very small, it starts with you and then expands, and then production is just like loads of people over a summer shooting a thing in extreme heat, and then slowly it becomes less and less people and becomes like, yeah, this very small group of people again trying to push something forward. So coming from a theatre thing, I was really aware of like rhythm. The rhythm of the making process feels really different, because as a director of theatre, you're sort of gearing up to this press night experience. And at press night, the show is sort of finished, but also everyone is there. So you're kind of, you'll really feel very connected to the entire process. Whereas in this, it's like it finishes and someone calls you up and goes, it's finished. Like it's a very different rhythm. But I think it's, from the beginning, in a way, Emma's empowerment of me as a director in terms of like how I wanted to shoot it and block it, then proliferate the culture in which it's like, if you're going to bring in someone like Laura Drake Chambers, right, you go like, well, how do you like what do you want to do, and you buy into their aesthetic principles. So I think everyone, it was like that feeling of, I've also, in terms of directing a film, it's like you're not included in things. It sets a very hierarchical. So I'd say, like, what's going on? Everyone looks really worried. And they say, don't worry about that. And I've never experienced that before, because I'm always normally like, in the terror together with everyone. So you're trying to find a balance in which everyone can do their job as best they can, but also, opening yourself up to the strange crisis between the different departments. If I'm going to shoot it like this and you're going to design it like that, then like hell, like how does that work? But hopefully good things come out of that friction. What we had to do is to like hold on to that very mysterious, elusive tone thing, and then let everyone else kind of like do their work within that.
It made it really, really hard to talk about, because it's still hard to talk about as a film. So in bringing everyone on board, it felt like every new person that we let in would have to have like a long conversation always, so hours and hours and hours of trying to explain the thing and shutting down examples. It's not like that. No, that's not what it's like at all. And then collaborating, probably at some point there being a very long argument between different perspectives on what it should be, and then coming together. Because it, but I think that that's an opportunity with indie film, is you have an opportunity to sort of create the tone and film you want, and we just saw it as an opportunity to make something that didn't exist, and as a result, is very hard to talk about even now, but now it exists.
It's funny. I think this process has made me think a lot about like mystery and the role of mystery in any creative process, and that the randomness of these people we've never met, saying like, again, these are the choices we're making. Okay, if you made that choice, then I have to make this choice over here, and like you're playing that game of negotiation. But even shooting some of the scenes, I was aware, I was like, as a director of this scene, I don't actually really know what is going on. And that's like really scary. So like the scene where they're rehearsing, doing this role play, which I think is one of the funniest scenes in the film as well. They're on the bed doing this role play, and I'm analysing the text, going like, I don't know what is going like, but I love that scene. But I have to trust that like with time, and that's a strange thing to admit, but it's like I also think it is about servitude, right? It's like I think I'm serving someone else's thing and trusting that they have some sort of undercurrent of something that they're trying to hold on to. So you at times challenge that, which I did a lot in the process of drafting. And then when you get challenged back enough, and they're also the producer, you go, okay then, and that's kind of, and I'm really glad about that, because I think if I'm left to my own devices, I could be too essential and kill like some of the more magical, strange things that happen in the film.
Okay, so maybe this is the moment to open up our discussion a bit. We have an audience microphone, I think. Yes, we have. So whoever wants to share a comment or have a question, I already see a hand over there.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for bringing your film to Berlin. I found myself very immersed. So there's this scene where Annette, right, her name is sitting in the restaurant with the antagonist, and they talk about the film, and she says something like, well, they talk, and he says, yeah, but they talk about men. And from that point, I couldn't help but started thinking about the Bechdel test. And so I thought, okay, so for those who don't know, it's a measurement of representation of women in the film, and to pass the test, you have to have at least 2 women, and then they have to talk, they have to have a dialogue, and they have to talk about something else but men. So I thought, okay, Annette didn't pass the Bechdel test, but I wondered if you have passed the Bechdel test, because should we also add they should not just talk about they should talk about something but men, and also they should talk about, or not, they should either talk or not talk about vaginal hygiene. Do you think that could be considered as something feminist, or do you think that the feminists might actually find it a little bit critical, that like it's a feminist film and all they talk about is vaginal hygiene?
Thanks, that's great. I love that, and I think it's like, yeah, it would really fail. Maybe it would really fail. Like the metrics by which we judge like if it's a feminist film or not are sort of really complex. But again, it's like I've really been struck by like as a man and the length of space it gives to the male characters actually in the film. You go like men do also like have a gender and need to address their gender in relation to women. So it's an interesting binary, like, okay, this is what you need to be a feminist film, but you can also have a feminist film which is like puts a lot of its focus actually on men in some capacity. But yeah, we failed miserably. I don't know. Not sure.
It does pass the Bechdel test.
Good.
Viv too, and Annette talking in the park about the script and lines. No vaginal health, I do think it's so that you rightfully picked up on the Bechdel testing, because that was in my head in the writing of that the restaurant scene. It's interesting though, because I know that is it Alice Bechdel? What's her first? Alice Bechdel has talked about the discourse around the Bechdel test and saying like, well, actually, it's sort of like a jumping off point, and in that way, it's interesting because the film, I consider it to be a feminist film. I don't, that's totally up. I can't control whether or not other people agree with that. But we needed men around to illustrate what men are doing to the women. We needed them to do that. And we also intentionally ramped that up by a lot of our crew were women, and we actually wanted to ramp it up by not having any presence of women apart from Viv2 and Vivian. And Viv2 is not actually ever referred. Viv2 is just what we call the actress playing Vivian in the movie. And as a result, there's so much of post was involved because we use little clips of our actual crew to fill in their crew, and so much of our post was scrubbing women from the film who were on their set, because their set was meant to be male dominated to highlight the women's voices when they came in, and scrubbing audio of women's voices on the crew, and so that didn't feel very feminist, but it was in service of a feminist arc.
Yeah, of course. We share a microphone also.
I just want to say, the whole talking about women, talking about men, it certainly depends on what you're talking about. So it's not like one is saying, "Gosh, I really like," it's not like that. This is such an impassioned film in one woman trying to get another to recognize there's this terrifying subsuming process. At the very least, if you don't question it intensely, and of course her friend doesn't seem to be questioning it, that kind of pleading and arguing is the opposite of women are talking about men again. That is problematic in most mainstream films. So it certainly seems like Alex Bechdel understands this and keeps trying to complicate what the Bechdel test is, to very little avail, actually, because everyone loves the Bechdel test. Because we all feel we can apply it. But that seems like the big caveat that needs to always be made. What are they talking about, actually?
No, you don't steal it. We share it. So, is there another question or comment from the audience? Do I see any hands? Yeah, I see a hand.
Hi. I just actually wanted to pay a little compliment to the movie. So often we see characters that are depicted from a place of abuse, but we never actually see, for example, how abuse works on, say, a friend or someone really important in your life, and whether or not they get the right to move on from these things. And seeing Annette's character and how she reacted to this, and how she reacted so honestly to it and said, you know what, maybe this specific thing didn't affect me in this specific way, but I'm still affected. That was really good.
Thank you.
There is another hand here.
Hi. So I found that in both films there is something that is very feminist, and it's the connection between the women. In the first one, of course, we have the funny part with the with the inanimated representation of a woman, but in your film, I got this feeling that even though men were always in the middle, there was like a language above all of that between women that men could never get into, and there was like this pact among the women in the film, and in this, I don't know which test pass, I don't know, But I found this very special because all of them share something without words. That the word no needs for words. I mean, they kind of knew what it meant to go through things as a woman, and I think this is very, very what actually got to me. Like, this was great, and it was maybe not said with words, but with actions, and this was very good.
Yeah, thank you for that. Who else wants to share a comment or has a question? Do I see more hands? Yes, here right in front. I think it's better with the microphone, so everyone can hear you.
Yeah, thanks. First of all, thank you so much for to the festival and for the film. I thought it was really authentic in a way, like very special. I don't know, like portrayal of many thematics, and it's hard for me not to try to understand kind of the psychological motivation of the character, and we see this character in two levels. So the first one as a director trying to make this film, right, but also as a real person per se, of trying to cope with her own reality or finding the way to cope with her own reality and maybe communicating what she seems to have a knot in the throat of not talking to her to a friend. And yeah, that struck me a little bit and raised a lot of questions. Like, I was trying to understand, why would she go through like this insane process of making a film, which no one seems to really understand and not even even trust like the process, and not just tell her friend what she actually thinks. So at we see after 3/4 of the film that she finally speaks up to what she really wants to say, and and we get into this less optimistic kind of end to the film, and like this popped into my mind, like the violence of desire. So what happens once that you are able to express your desire, like this price to pay. So I wanted to it's not really a question, but if you can comment on that, like walk us through this psychological motivation of the character in these two lines. Yeah.
Well, you're absolutely right to say that it does seem insane to make a film, to go to all that trouble rather than just have this conversation. But I think that something that we were trying to do with the film was like always playing with the idea of like people being like, wait, isn't it insane to be behaving this way and making these choices, and then just showing glimmers of letting the audience into like, oh wait, she might actually be completely right in why she's doing that. For example, it's constantly subtly reinforced within the friend group that everyone's moved on, and therefore there's nothing really to say. It's fine. As when she, I guess part of what makes the film ultimately a tragedy is when she finally does do the thing that hopefully as an audience you've been rooting for her to say, then it kind of goes as badly as it possibly could. And she doesn't, I think that was another thing that we were trying to, again, speak to, like what feels most truthful is that you might feel like you have this moment to like say everything. And, particularly with Stuart, actually, you kind of stumble on your words, and it's not actually that eloquent, and it doesn't resolve anything or get across the enormity of actually what you've been dealing with.
Yeah, and I think also in terms of the thought about the project, is it's like the opposite of sentimental value. It's like, no, art is not redeeming. Like, it doesn't save you. It doesn't like cure your shit. I mean, you don't have to go to therapy. it's a terrible way for her to behave, but also I also believe it's true within a context that demands that of artists too, which is like, define yourself. Like, what is your trauma? How can you use that? How can you sell that? Which is a lot of where we're at in terms of why you're the person to tell the story. You wind up branding yourself and building projects around things that aren't particularly comfy nor helpful. So it's a failed endeavor, but I think it's on the other side of that. I think it's sort of a romantic notion that she can save her friendship through her art, rather than, I think it's just also plain fear that to address something like that, if someone says they're happy, and that's also because Annette lives under the patriarchy, I think. So there's a capitalist thing, which is like, how can I be successful as an artist and push myself forward in the context that demands that of me? And how am I also not able to speak those things because of the system in which I live at an interpersonal level, I think.
Yeah, I think art is not redeeming is probably a perfect way to end this first film festival screening night. So let me thank Eileen Jones, let me thank Emma Paetz and Tom Brennan, our wonderful guests for this panel.